Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. I decided this summer to dedicate most of my reading time to the 1001 Nights. It was a tough decision, okay? Not because of the merit or because of the work itself, but because, usually I'm just waiting for the summer to devour like 1001 books. And this time it turns out that I'm gonna be reading pretty much the 1001 Nights for most of the summer. So this is a monumental infinite classic, as you know, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reading the translation published by Penguin, which was done by Malcolm C. Lyons, okay, and also with the collaboration of his wife Ursula Lyons. I have the first volume here, and basically the importance of this translation is that this is the first time that the Arabic text is translated to English since that classic translation by Richard Burton, which is from 1885 to 1888. So we are looking at quite an achievement here and quite an event with this translation. So just to give you some background on it, the Penguin edition is published in 3 volumes, okay? The first one, which is 960 pages, covers nights 1 through 294, plus the story of Ali Baba, okay, which was not part of the original text. We're going to talk about that briefly in a second. Then the second volume, which is 856 pages long, covers nights 294 up to 719, and volume 3 finally, which is 831 pages long, covers the remaining nights from 719 up to 1001, plus the story of Aladdin, which is also an addition, as you may know. Basically, we are looking at a total of 2,647 pages for the whole work. So let's begin with a kind of a prologue, and this prologue is not really by me, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to let Jorge Luis Borges talk here. He's not going to talk, he's going to talk through me, right? So Borges published a book that is available in English titled 7 Nights, and what that is a collection of discussions, a collection of speeches or dissertations that he gave on 7 different topics, 7 different nights, right? So that's an idea right there. If you don't want to read the 1001 Nights, you can at least read the 7 Nights by Borges, and that's pretty good because one of those nights he covers the 1001 Nights. So it's available in English once again. And he talks about this, he has a main idea here when it comes to the 1001 Nights, which is this. He says that it's really nice to get lost in this work and to forget one's own poor destiny. Okay, kind of like, getting lost in something so extraordinary that it helps you to forget the fact that most of us, myself included, lead rather, ordinary lives when compared to something like what we see in the 1001 Nights. And he mentions 4 points. These are his highlights from the 1001 Nights. He mentions that we are dealing with a world of extremes, okay? Extreme passion, extreme violence, all of those things. And another interesting element that this work presents is the idea of magic, right? Magic and also like hidden treasures. There are many stories that deal with people finding treasure, finding riches, okay? Also, another point, the third point that Borges develops is the idea that we have stories within stories. So the best metaphor here, or the best image, would be the Russian matryoshka. So you open it and then there's another doll inside it, and you keep finding smaller and smaller dolls. That is basically the structure of many of the stories presented in the 1001 Nights. And then one final item that Borges emphasizes is the very important role that dreams play in the 1001 Nights, which I think is amazing. That alone would be a good reason for me to read them, because I love dreams and what you can do with them in terms of, dreams and literature too. So he also talks about the fact that many stories were added to the collection. For example, the French translator Galon added Aladdin's story, just to give you an example, and also the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves killed by a slave girl. So, then he mentions also the fact that De Quincey, for instance, mentions in one of his essays something that he remembers from the 1001 Nights, a story that does not really exist. So De Quincey got creative with his memory, really, and he related something that is not really present in the original text. Robert Louis Stevenson also has his book New Arabian Nights, and as you may know, there's also a short story by Edgar Allan Poe about the 1002nd tale of Scheherazade. So Borges says, why not? You know, this is a book that is alive. That's why people keep adding to it. It's a book that continues to develop with the things that we can add to it. And why not? You know, isn't that what happens with every text in a way? Every text can be added to. So those are some things that Borges mentions, and I read his talk about the 1001 Nights as an introduction to the whole work. So I wanted to share that with you. Now let me tell you a little bit about my approach to this, because this is going to be a series of videos, obviously. When I was deciding, okay, I'm going to read this, you know, I would like to share this with everybody, because otherwise, as always, you know, it just stays in this room, and what's the point of that? At the same time, I asked myself, so how can I do this without driving myself nuts, right? And this is what I decided to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you my thoughts as written on my journal. Okay, so it's going to be a combination of reading and reflection here. Why do I say that? This is different, just a little bit different from my usual style, you know, so I hope you enjoy it, but this is the best way that I can do it. Otherwise, I would not have been able to put a video together on the 1001 Nights. So the story begins, believe it or not, with adultery, okay? And on page 1, we have two brothers who are kings. One of them is a good king, the other one is a little bit despotic, right? And they are both cheated on by their wives. You will see that the view of women in the 1001 Nights is quite a bit misogynistic at times, even though, and we have to remember this, we have a very strong, resourceful, even empowered woman at the center, because Scheherazade, who is the storyteller, is really a very, you know, very smart woman. So we have to keep that in mind. The story that you know, that we have all heard, is the story of King Shahryar, who, after being cheated on by his wife, decides to request one virgin every night, and then the following day he has her sent to the executioner, because, you know, that way he avoids, or he thinks he's going to avoid being cheated on. So that's when Shahrazad enters the story. She is the vizier's daughter, and she says, okay, I want to try this, okay, to stop the carnage. I want to be married to this King Shahryar and see if I can keep him entertained with stories every night so that he will not kill me. And that is basically how the story begins. Storytelling saves her life. You're going to see many instances throughout the 1001 Nights where storytelling saves somebody's life. And this is a great comment, I think. You know, that is why we tell stories. That is why we write novels and short stories or novellas or whatever, because there is a saving power in narrative. Right? So before the whole story begins, we have a story by Shahrazad's father, okay? And this is the story of the donkey and the bull. It's interesting because it begins as a fable, but then it ends as a sort of a taming of the shrew kind of story. And this is a very common type of story, okay? You can find a taming of the shrew story in El Conde Lucanor by Don Juan Manuel. And in case you don't know, El Conde Lucanor is in Spanish what the Canterbury Tales is in English, or what the Decameron is in Italian. It's our, you know, Spanish collection of stories. So you can definitely find that story right there. Nights 1 through 3, right? We have the story of the merchant and the genie, in which a merchant inadvertently kills a genie's son, okay? So the genie is going to kill him. But then 3 men appear and begin to tell stories of wives and brothers turned into animals in order to save the merchant's life. So from the very start, you have once again this idea that storytelling can have a saving power. It's on night number 3 to 9, that we have the first famous, or the first important story from the 1001 Nights, and that is the story of the fisherman and the Ifrit. So the Ifrit was put in a bottle, right? He was trapped in a bottle, and basically what he did was he promised to give riches to the person who freed him. So he was like, okay, I'm going to give all this. Whenever somebody frees me from this bottle, this is what they're going to get. They're going to get all these riches. And he keeps adding to that, right? Over and over again. But the thing is, he spends 1,800 years inside that bottle. So by the end, at one point, he gets fed up and he says, okay, you know what? Forget about the riches. When somebody saves me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill that person, right? So that is what he says. Now, a fisherman saves him, right? And he asks him how he was able to fit in the bottle, right? When he's about to be killed, he says, so how were you able to fit in that small bottle? So when the Ifrit goes back into the bottle, basically he is trapped. So we have a very, very cunning, fisherman here, very smart person. And eventually what happens is that the fisherman becomes prosperous in a roundabout way. Okay, there are many, many roundabout stories in the 1001 Nights. Included within this story, because remember that we have a matryoshka type of thing here, right? Stories within the stories. We have the tale of King Sinbad and the falcon. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so King Sinbad has a falcon that he's quite attached to. And at one point they see a tree where, kind of a butter-like substance is dripping from. And what he does is, King Sinbad, he takes a plate and he gives this butter-like thing, liquid, to the falcon to eat, right? And the falcon rejects it. He just, pushes the plate away. So he says, okay, you don't want to eat, I want to, some of this. So he tries to drink this liquid, and the falcon kicks it too, so that he is not able to do that. The king is enraged, right? And he cuts off one of the falcon's wings, causing him to slowly, bleed to death. Now at that point, the falcon with his head points upward, right? So he points up, the king looks at the top of the tree, and he realizes that at the top there is a viper's nest. So basically this butter-like liquid, this substance, was the venom from this vipers. The falcon was only trying to help, right? But the king just, mistrusted, and that led to his downfall, because he killed this falcon that he loved so much. Also included within the story of the Ifrit and the fisherman on nights 7 to 8 is the story of the semi-petrified prince, which I thought was very, interesting and very memorable. You have here a prince whose wife cheated on him with a horrible man, right? It's a horrible, horrible person. And it's a comment really on the complexity of attraction, right? It raises the question, why are we, or some people at least, attracted to what is harmful to us, and we shun what is obviously good for us, right? So it's a really interesting question that this story raises. It's one of the mysteries, really, of the human condition. The story continues, right? We have the wife is a sorceress and is cheated into freeing the prince from his spell. I don't want to give you too many details, because most of what I want to do is really to inspire you to read these stories. Maybe watching this video you see, oh, this is something that I'm interested in, I'm going to check it out, right? So I'll try not to reveal the endings or anything like that here. This is not really a summary, okay? On night 13 we have the story of the envier and the envied. This one reminded me of the biblical story of Joseph and his brothers. Okay, there is somebody here who is thrown into a pit also. So you have even that detail right there. And the whole idea is good coming out of evil, right? So that is present also in the story of Joseph and his brothers. The story of the porter also has much going for it, and this is covered in nights 9 through 19. And it includes the stories of the three dervishes. I don't know if you have seen the film by Pier Paolo Pasolini, The Arabian Nights. It's one of the adaptations of this monumental text, and he includes a lot of material from this story of the three dervishes in his movie. The thing is, in his movie he really changes things around. He changes the endings of stories, changes the characters and all that. And one of the stories there is the one about the monkey who can do calligraphy. Okay, you can see that in Pasolini's film. It's basically a man who has been turned into a monkey through a spell. And another thing you can find in Pasolini's film is on night number 9, the porter's joke about the three women's private parts. Okay, I'll let you discover that for yourself, but that is also there in the film and on night number 9 here in the book. There are here a lot of echoes also of other famous stories, not necessarily references, but it shows you really that when people start telling stories, there are many, many connections that you're going to find, even in the stories of people who had no contact with each other. From different sides of the world, you can find many, many similarities, because the human condition is the human condition. The circumstances may change, but the human condition is the same in the end. For instance, night 15, we have the story of the youth in the island. And I connect this story to the myth of Oedipus Rex. Okay, you have here a man who meets this youth, right? And in time, he realizes that he is fated to kill this person, even though he likes him very much. It's like he cannot escape fate, just like what happened to Oedipus, right? In that play by Sophocles. Also, we have the story of the man with the 40 beautiful women. Okay, he is told not to open a certain door, but he decides to open it, and that leads to his downfall. Remember the story of Bluebeard? The wife is told, do not open this door. So we have once again this idea of something forbidden, right? You should not do this. And when they decide to do it, of course, that leads to trouble. There are many memorable images in the 1001 Nights, as you can imagine. For instance, on night 17, we have 3 sisters who arrive at a town where everything, absolutely, almost absolutely everything, has been turned into stone, except for gold, silver, gems, and rich fabrics. Okay, so imagine that, a place where everything except riches have been turned to stone. And one of the women enters a palace, and right there she meets a beautiful young man who tells her the story of the town and how it was that everything ended up being turned into stone. She wants to marry him, of course, and she offers herself, okay? She is willing at that point to leave all the riches to her sisters. So a comment basically on the fact that love is a greater treasure than all riches, right? And then the story continues with the 3 sisters and what they decide to do. Let's see, we have nights 20 to 24, the story of Nur al-Din and Shams al-Din, which includes an episode where 2 characters, a mother and a son, recognize each other through the meals that they cook. Okay, I thought that was very nice. The mother at one point says, okay, I've tried this dish, right? And I know that there is only one person who can cook this meal better than I, and that is my son. So the characters come to recognize each other through the meals that they prepare. And there is also a part in this story where a character named Hassan is made to believe that an entire segment of his life was part of a dream. Okay? That reminded me, of course, of Pedro Calderón de la Barca's Life is a Dream, La vida es sueño, that great classic of Spanish theater. So you can see there are many, many connections here that you can make in order to, enrich your reading experience of the 1001 Nights. Another interesting story is that of the barber's brothers. Okay, he has many brothers and they all tell stories. Of course, not all of the stories are excellent or perfect or anything, but I liked the story of the 4th brother on night number 32. He is beaten up because he happens to be missing one eye, okay? And the king, in the place where he is, he doesn't like people who are missing one eye, quote unquote, especially if it's the right eye. Okay, so it's like not his fault, right? The king just doesn't like that. He has him beaten, right? Because of that. So then the man looks for a place to rest. He finds an open door and he goes in, but he is immediately put under arrest. When the authorities see the mark on his previous beating, they assume that he's a thief because he has been beaten, right? So he's beaten again. You have a great comment here on injustice and how the marks that we bear can determine, our future. Very, very unfair here. People will judge you on those appearances, right? He's beaten. It was no fault. He didn't do anything, right? But people assume things. And that's why he is caught up in this kind of never-ending cycle of misery, if you want to put it that way. We have on night number 33, the story of the 5th brother, which I also thought was very interesting. And very similar to the story of the milkmaid. That it's not really a fable. I would call it a parable because there are no animals involved. This guy has a lot of expensive glassware and he is thinking what he's going to do, all of the wonderful things that he's going to do with this glassware that he's going to sell. He's going to marry the daughter of Shams al-Din. He's going to be rich, right? But then he starts to imagine how mean he's going to be to everybody around him once he achieves this dream. And at one point he imagines that he's going to kick somebody, and he actually kicks. All the glassware falls down and he loses everything, right? So basically the story of the milkmaid here in a different form. The story continues in the 1001 Nights, so it's a different tale also. And then we have the 6th brother who is invited to a banquet of imaginary food. He pretends to eat non-existent food, and he's also given non-existent drink and all that. I was reminded of the movie Hook. Remember when the Robin Williams character is eating something that is not there and the food appears all of a sudden. So that is a funny story, you know, that you can find here. I'm not gonna spoil it for you. Let's see what else I wrote down. Some days I was not able to read that much, so you know, I skip a little bit. Nights, here's something that I wanted to let you know about. Nights 45 to 145. We are looking at more than 300 pages here, are concerned with the story of King Umar ibn al-Numan and his family. Okay, this is a very long, meandering story that, if you ask me, it really lacks the cohesiveness that the more traditional, you know, the previous tales have. So it does have its moments, right? But at the same time, I feel that it really needs a little bit more, you know, something to hold it together. Now, some characters stand out. For instance, I really liked the character of Princess Abrisa, who is so beautiful that she can overpower the strongest man, right? So it's like beauty is more powerful than strength in this case. And also memorable is the character of the witch-like Dat al-Dawahi, okay? Also interesting, if you like this kind of thing, as you get closer to night number 100, there are many battle scenes, okay? So this story has quite an important epic element to it, in case you like that. So there's that, you know, to consider also when looking at this story. It also includes the story, another one that you can find in the Pasolini film, of Aziz and Aziza. This is on nights 112 to 128. And this one is about a man who is betrothed to his cousin, right? But he develops an interest on a wily woman, a type of femme fatale that he meets. Now, this woman communicates with him through gestures, and he has no idea what the gestures mean. But it's Aziza, the one that he was supposed to marry, who interprets the gestures for him, and she even tells him how to win the other girl. Okay, so can you believe that? It's a very, very awful situation, even though she knows that she's hurting herself by telling him, yeah, this is how you can, you know, be with that other woman. We have, you know, I'm not going to reveal the ending right there, but it's a story of self-sacrifice and basically the dangers of despising what you have and looking for what you don't have. You know, it's like never being satisfied with what you have and always wanting more right here. Another story that is included in that lengthy tale, and this you can find on nights 107 to 137, is the story of Taj al-Muluk Haran and Princess Donia. Okay, this is a woman who continuously rejects the man. She does not like men, she does not trust them. She had a dream in which she saw a male dove abandoning a female dove to her death, right? So after that, she just cannot, you know, trust men because of that dream. So this man has a really, really difficult task in trying to win this Princess Donia because of that, right? This story is a condemnation of cynicism, really. It says, you know, do not be cynical. You know, sometimes people do the things they do not because they're being evil, but because they have no choice, for instance, right? So that is something that I got from that. So we are on nights 107 to 137, and I have spoken quite a bit already, so I'm gonna, you know, end this first video about the 1001 nights right here. I hope you this is useful to you. You know, that is the main reason why I'm doing it, because I know that this is a very lengthy book and it's very easy to get lost. And my hope is that you won't be more lost in this book because of my videos, but that you will find at least some stories here that you would like to check out, and that would be a way to, you know, start entering the world of the 1001 nights. Do you have any comments, questions, recommendations, any stories from the 1001 nights that you have read that you would like to share, or your experience with the book? As always, I would be very, very grateful and very happy to hear that. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.